Here with me now is Chris James, the Director of External Affairs at the Motor Neurone Disease Association, who's come onto the podcast to chat about the charity's work with Coronation Street on Paul's devastating storyline. Chris, lovely to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to meet you. Thank you for asking me to come on the podcast.
No worries. It's really interesting to be able to chat with charities and other associations that work with Coronation Street sometimes to get their side of the story. So
Yeah,
could you tell me a little bit about the Motor Neurone Disease Association first? You know, the sort of work it does in supporting individuals with MND and what your personal role in the charity is.
yes, of course. As people are probably aware, motor neuron disease is a progressive neurological disorder. There are about 5,000 people in the UK with MND at any one time. And the Motor Neurone Disease Association is there really for three main things. Firstly, we fundraise for and promote research into MND, so looking for cures and treatments for the disease.
Mhm.
We also provide a support service for people with MND. So things like we have volunteer association visitors who go out and work and support families. We run a helpline. We produce a lot of information for people, and we try and support people through their journey with MND as much as we possibly can.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the other aspect of our work is campaigning, trying to get the best possible treatment and services for people with MND through the health and social care system and the benefit system. And my role is I'm Director of External Affairs, so I have quite a broad remit, actually. I look after the kind of comms and marketing side.
Sure.
I look after the campaigning, policy and public affairs piece, but I also look after the sort of celebrity management side of things, our patrons, ambassadors, and all our sort of high profile supporters as well. So
Okay.
fairly big unit.
Yeah, great, lovely. So how did the collaboration between the MND Association and Coronation Street come about?
Well, it all started when the Coronation Street production team contacted us towards the end of last year, sort of last quarter of last year, said they were interested in exploring an M&D storyline within Coronation Street. And they were really keen to get our support to do that. What they were really conscious of is that they wanted to make it as authentically a really authentic story about
Mm.
MND, a real story, and they wanted to make sure that it was as accurate as possible.
Right.
And so they've been absolutely brilliant. They contacted us early on. They talked to us. They ran storylines by us. They still run the storylines by us and the scripts to see
Mhm.
if we have any thoughts. And they've been really amenable because what we've been able to do is kind of introduce things into this or suggest things for the storyline that
Yeah.
might be impacting on Paul as he goes through his journey with MND.
That's it. So did they have an idea at the beginning, right from the start, how they wanted Paul's story to progress? Or was it more of a case that their ideas were in the early stages and initially they wanted your help into turning that into a realistic story?
I think they had an idea of how the storyline might progress, but they really wanted us to really give them a sense check on that about the progression. And I think they'd already done some research into
Yeah.
the potential progression of MND and that journey, but they just wanted to make sure that what they were portraying was accurate. But they did actually ask us several things about, how might MND progress?
Mm.
Yeah, how would it be diagnosed?
Yeah.
What would be those early symptoms of MND, particularly for those early stages of the storyline? Because obviously they needed to build that in and make it as accurate as possible. And everybody's diagnosis, in a sense, is different,
Yeah.
but it's we were able to help and support them with that right from the beginning, really.
Sure. Were there any elements of living with MND that you wanted to make sure that Coronation Street got absolutely right?
Yeah, as I said, it's difficult because actually everybody's journey with MND is different.
Mm.
And so there isn't one story about MND in that sense.
Yeah.
They're all very powerful stories, and this is a really devastating disease. So I think we were really keen that they were able to show perhaps some of the challenges of diagnosis, which we know is an issue with MND.
Mm.
There's no test you can do that says it's MND. It tends to be an elimination of all other things, and then you
Yeah.
get to MND, and that's a challenge for people. And we were very keen that you'd show the real impact of MND. I think people are quite shocked when they hear some of the information about
Mm.
MND. that half of people die within 2 years of diagnosis, and
Yeah.
that's a really shocking figure, and it really takes. So to explore those types of things, and also the kinds of support that someone with MND can get as well, so that to bring those into the storyline, to show people that whilst there isn't a treatment for MND and there's no cure for MND, there are really good support services there for people.
Yeah.
And of course the impact on the family, and of course that's something that the storyline is exploring between Paul and Billy's relationship, and how that's the challenges that MND is presenting to that relationship.
Yeah, sure. Were there any like misconceptions about MND that you wanted to make sure that you covered, or any kind of misunderstandings that people might have had about the condition before the storyline started
Uh,
airing?
That's a really good question. I think there were a few things that, in fact, the storyline has explored this and the frustrations for people in M&D. And I should say, this storyline is so massively important for the M&D community, because it's helping them explain M&D, and
Yeah.
they get so frustrated they have to keep saying it's MND, and this is what it is, And this storyline with the wide viewership that Coronation Street has is really helping with that. So, for example, things like one of the aspects is slurred speech. And people often think someone's drunk.
Yeah.
Well, drunk, they've got MND, they're kind of slurring their speech. So highlighting those sorts of things are really, really important. And I think I guess, and this is one of the most challenging pieces to misconceptions with MND, is that you might get better.
Mm.
And nowadays, with many diseases and conditions, that is the case.
Yeah.
But with MND, that's not going to happen. M&D is progressive. It will progress at different rates for different people and speeds, but it will progress.
Yeah.
And so you've already seen the impact, I think, in the story on Paul and his livelihood of, and how that's affecting him, and he's lost he's losing the use of his hands and things like that. So those are really important, very important for the M&D community, and very important for awareness about M&D.
Sure. So I spoke earlier with Dan Brocklebank about his work on the story too, who plays Billy. What would you say is the value of having a patron of the MND Association working so closely with the story?
It's huge. We couldn't quite believe it. I don't think Dan could quite believe it himself,
No.
actually. And of course, he's been a great ambassador for the M&D Association for many years, since he lost his grandfather to MND. And I think, absolutely. And that essence of having him as part of this story is really important. And I think I know he's probably finding it enormously challenging, I suspect, in how he's approaching it, and there's a lot of resonance, I'm sure, for him in the storyline. But to have that support, it's certainly enabled us to tell that. It helped us to tell the story, particularly with the media aspect to it and the raising of awareness. To have Dan being very happy as an actor involved in this story to talk about it, it's really great. Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges, the biggest challenges, do you think that Dan, the Pete, and the Coronation Street cast are going to be facing as the story moves forward?
I think showing the progression of MND is going to be difficult. I mean, just for Peter as an actor, he's following in the footsteps of people like Benedict Cumberbatch and Eddie Redmayne, who played Stephen Hawking. He had MND, so and I think he's doing an amazing job. And I'm sure he's doing a lot of research into how he's going to portray that as he moves forward. I guess one of the challenging things is going to be and I don't know how the storyline will progress as it goes, but I said earlier, with M&D, you don't get better. There's going to be a point where there's going to be a part of this story that is about end of life and palliative care, and how you deal with death and bereavement. And I think for any drama, that's always challenging, making that authentic. And I'm sure they're thinking very, very hard about that. And I know when the time comes, they'll probably share some of the scripts with us to talk us through that. So that's going to be, I suspect, very tough for the production team, the actors, and everybody involved.
Yeah. What's your work with Peter Ash entailed so far then?
Well, we've talked to Peter about the role and about MND, and I know he's met us. We managed to put him in touch with someone who has MND.
Hmm.
Person, so he got to talk to someone about their experience of MND, and also we're always there to help if there's any queries or questions that he might have. We're very fortunate. We have a great specialist MND nurse coordinator,
Yeah.
works in one of our M&D care centres, who's been supporting as well, who has that sort of medical professional knowledge about certain aspects of M&D, and it's really important that we got that professional support in as well to support Paul in doing the role. Sorry, to support Peter in doing the role.
How have you been watching? How have you found his portrayal of the condition on screen so far?
I think it's extraordinary, and I know the challenges of this, because at the end of the day, and for the production team, this is a drama,
Mm,
so there has to be dramatic license.
yeah.
But actually, for me, and just from the reaction we've seen from the M&D community, they feel it's very real. And I think it's really effective. We know people, and this is the other side of the story, but that the M&D community is very pleased. But people with M&D and their families are finding it tough to watch.
Yeah, but
It's resonating so much with them, and obviously, that support for them is really important. So I think, I think it's coming across as a really, it's clearly a drama, and there are dramatic aspects. The story's been very dramatic in the last couple of weeks, that whole storyline and the relationship, etc. So but it still feels very real and dramatic, real and genuinely a person story with M&D, definitely.
And
Yeah.
what about Paul's family? So we've seen it's his partner Billy, his sister Gemma, his mum as well, and how
Mhm.
they've reacted to Paul's news. Has this mirrored some of the reactions that you've seen from family members of people diagnosed with MND?
Yeah, M&D, I mean, it's just a brutal disease.
Mm,
It really is a brutal disease, and it has an enormous impact on anybody who's close to that person with the disease, because they see parts of them disappearing over
mm,
time. 85% of people have communication issues, and many of them lose their voice. So and they get cut off away in a way of the family, however hard that family tries to keep that. The pressure on the family is extraordinary, and
mm,
those are genuine pressures that you're seeing on
yeah.
Coronation Street. And I think we've seen with the rugby league player Rob Burrow, who's told his story with M&D very publicly. Whenever there's a documentary about Rob, you see the pressures on the family,
Yeah.
so yeah, these are genuinely, this is genuinely the impact of MND when it hits a
Mm,
family, most
mm.
definitely. Yeah.
How have you found the reaction to viewers so far on the story? Have you kind of been tracking what Coronation Street fans have been saying about it online or anything?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be very positive. I think
Mm.
people are they obviously comment on the dramatic aspects to it as well, and but clearly, I think people are 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 really being affected by the story. It's probably giving people cause to think about MND, diseases like MND, and the impact they have, and I think people have been very positive. They've been certainly very engaged with it from what we can see, and there's lots of media coverage as well going
Yeah.
around the story as well, which is great.
I guess that was again one of your aims when working with Coronation Street on this, to raise awareness, to get people to understand what MND was, to get people talking about it.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that awareness is so important. I mean, just for the work that we do on behalf of the M&D community and working with the M&D community to raise more money for research, to get better care and support, and to be able to campaign on the issues that really are important to them. So that awareness in all those areas drives all those things for us. So to have, on a major drama that's going out, several times a week, with a story about M&D, just makes a massive difference to the M&D community and to awareness.
Mm.
Yeah.
What can people do if they watch this storyline and they want to support or raise more money for the MND Association?
Well, the best thing to do is probably go on our website, where you can find
Mhm.
more information about MND, but also the ways that you can support the association. We have a number of voluntary roles that people can get involved in. Clearly, we have a range of fundraising activities that people might like to do and to support the association. So yeah, it's just www.mndassociation.org. If you on the website, all the information's there, but obviously we welcome any support that people give, and extremely grateful for it. Thank you.
Yeah. And do you have any other, you said there's always charity work, there's always fundraising going on. Do you have any other big collaborations or projects that you're working on or coming up in the future?
Yeah, we've got a number of things in terms of fundraising activity. We've got a number of kind of big corporate relationships at the moment and partnerships that we're doing. We've just had Global MND Awareness Day, which was in June. We did a lot of work around that. So yeah, we're certainly, in terms of our campaigning work, we're still pushing for more funding for MND through the government, and also working on a number of other projects, sort of campaigning wise, to get better services for people with MND. So we've got quite there's a lot going on at the moment, certainly. And you know, over the last few 18 months has been amazing. It was Kev Sinfield, obviously, you know, his project. We're sort of waiting with bated breath, you know, to see if Kev might do another challenge. You know.
Well, I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you so much
you
for coming on the podcast today, and it's been really interesting to hear about the story from your point of view. Yeah, really hope this does do what you want it to do and get more people talking and raising money, and hopefully, like you said, one day finding a cure.
Thank you so much for your support, Michael. It's been great to be on the podcast. Thank you.
It's lovely talking to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.